So we just calculated this whole column where we saw no debt, 100% stock, the beta, the cost for stock, the weighted average cost of capital, because it's all stock, the value of the operations, and number of shares, price per share. We're going to calculate next using leverage, 20% debt. We're going to use this formula, Hamada formula, which was developed merging capital asset pricing model and Modigliani-Miller. We use it to determine the beta at different amounts of financial leverage. So the beta with leverage equals the unlevered, the first case we did, times 1 plus 1 minus tax rate times the weight of debt divided by weight of stock. So here we're given 20% stock, 80% debt under this case. Beta, using the formula, is unlevered, D123, right there. And then times 1 plus 1 minus the tax rate, which was the 40%, times B181, debt, divided by equity, 82. When we do that, our new beta is 1.15. So when we calculate the capital asset pricing model, risk-free rate is still 6% from before, plus the new beta 1.15 times the market risk premium. So that comes up with our cost for stock with 20% debt is 12.9. And our weighted average cost of capital is B181, 20%. Then you have to affect it by taxes times C157. C157 was what we were giving for the rate of debt with 20% debt. Plus B182, so 80% in stock, and our cost for stock is 12.9. So that whole thing, weighted average cost of capital is 11.28, right? Now we're going to calculate the corporate value with 20% debt. The value of the operations is free cash flow. Remember, we had zero growth, so these are going to zero out, divided by weighted average cost of capital. So D129 free cash flow was 30 divided by the weighted average cost of capital, 11.28, is 256. And the last thing we do is say, well, how much of that is debt? How much of it equity? So 20% is debt, 20% of this 265.96, and 80% is equity. So that gave us this whole column. We're given 20% is in debt, given the cost of debt at 20%. Stock weight is 80% equity. We calculated the beta. We calculated through capital asset pricing model, the cost of stock. Came up with a weighted average cost of capital. Came up with a value of operations. We split it out based on debt and stock, 20%, 80%. Last thing, we calculate the number of stock, number of shares. So B162, we had 10, and we multiply that by how much is in equity. So value of operations is 265 minus 53. So 212.77 is this whole number. And divide by C159, the 265 value, minus B160, which is the value of debt here. So we get the number of shares, and when we divide, right, when we divide the value of the equity divided the number of shares, we get a price per share. So we do that for each of these instances, 30, 40, and 50. So for instance, at 40, We were given this, got that, calculate the beta based on this formula here, Hamada's formula. We come up with the cost of stock using capital asset pricing model, weighted average cost of capital using debt here, this 10%, and the cost of stock, 14%. Come up with the value of operations, right, using the formula we were given. When we split it up, come up with the number of shares. So in total, what you can see across this is the weighted average cost of capital is lowest here, actually, 11.04. Actually, it's 11.01. Our value of operations, 271. But our price per share, you can see, is highest. 27.25 is higher than this, higher than that, higher than this. So our price per share is highest where our weighted average cost of capital is lowest. So in other words, we're looking for that debt to equity split, in this case 30-70, where we minimize our weighted average cost of capital, which is therefore going to maximize our value of operations, right? And come up with the highest price per share. So capitalizing with a 30-70 split is going to give us the highest price per share. And that's the goal. Okay, and now we're going to describe a recapitalization where we issue debt and use that debt to buy back stock. And we're going to look at the resulting market value of equity, the price per share, the number of shares purchased, and the number of remaining shares. We're also going to highlight one thing we skipped over here was the number of shares, how to calculate that. So, there's a little formula for that. So we start before issuing the debt. We have 250 is the value of operations, no short-term investments, at totaling 250, no debt. The value of equity is obviously then 250. If we had 10 shares, it's $25 per share. Now what we're going to do in the next step is issue the debt, but we won't buy back the shares yet. So we issue the debt. So the value of operations here, where we've issued 20% debt, 20% debt is this 265. When we issue the debt of 20%, and 60, C60 minus B. So that's how much debt increases when we raise 20% of it in debt. So that totals 319. So the value to the equity is 265, right? We take out the debt we've taken on. And if there's 10 shares, the value per share is 2660. So the value of stock is that 265. We haven't distributed any cash, and the wealth for the shareholders is 265. Now we're going to repurchase shares using that 5319. So our value of operations stays the same. We use that 5319 to buy back shares. So our value total is 265.96. We still have the debt, right, that we've issued, 5319, which results in the value of equity at 217.77 just by subtracting those. Another way to calculate that is this formula here, 1 minus the portion of debt times the value of operations new. So in other words, 20% is in debt, so 80%, 1 minus 20, is in equity or stock, and we multiply that times the 265. So the 212.77 is the value of the equity or stock. Now we're going to say what are the number of shares. So we had 10, but we used the 5319 to buy back some shares. And there's a little formula here. Number of shares after the buyback equals the number of shares prior times the value of operations new minus the debt new divided by the operations new minus debt old. And this is just a formula. So you can use that in other situations. And so when we use that, we have the number prior, 219, D219. So we had 10 shares. We're multiplying it by operations new, E214, minus D new debt, E217. So minus that, divided by E214, the operations new minus the old debt, D old, C217. So we didn't have any debt before. So that results in 8. So it's saying after the buyback, we used the debt that we raised 5319 to buy back those 2 shares. We bought them back. I have 8 shares left over. So the price per share, we just divide. The value of stock, the 212, you calculate it there. The debt value of the debt, we can either just use that or we can use this formula. So value of operations new minus the old debt divided by the old number of shares. So that's the price after. E214 is the value of operations new minus C217 right here divided by C219, the old number of shares. And that represents the recapitalization. So we issued debt. This is before the debt was issued. We issued debt, and we used that debt, 513.19, which was at this point still cash on our books, short-term investments, and the debt. Then we used that to buy back 2 shares. So the shares declined. We used the cash here to pay out and buy the shares back. We still have the debt here. And that's it.